Good morning and welcome to Mental Health Matters Office Hours. It's the show where we take a look at all of your well-being at work issues, concerns, questions and thoughts. And it's always expert-led conversation. Today, we are absolutely delighted to welcome Leanne Elliott. She is the co-founder of the Truth Lies Work podcast, and she is definitely going to be spilling the tea on all of your workplace woes and also what we can do about it. So, let's take a look at Leanne in action.
Navigating today's workplace is tough.
Toxic employees, endless drama, a lack of motivation. We've all been there.
But fear not, we are here to help. My name is Leanne and I'm a chartered psychologist.
My name is Al and I'm a business owner. And together we dig into the scientific and commercial secrets behind great workplace cultures in Truth, Lies and Work.
A no-nonsense, award-winning psychology podcast brought to you by the HubSpot Podcast Network. We explore practical strategies for building a great workplace.
We debunk buzzwords and bring you the very best advice around finding and keeping great people, from personality tests.
Personality tests they're mostly bollocks. I don't know what kind of language you do on your podcast. I don't know if people know this, but the man who wrote the Wonder Woman comics is the person who invented the disc.
When more flexible working became a norm, you no longer hurt your career prospects by being the one person who worked flexibly.
All the way to avoiding high turnover.
We recruit and promote people to managerial roles based on their technical skills, not their people skills. This is a very fundamental problem we have, which we haven't directly tackled.
From toxic-free cultures,
interventions for the individual are only half the answer. Systemic change is the other half.
to sustainable growth.
Thinking beyond just paying somebody a good salary, I think is super necessary now. We have to offer so much more than that.
We have got you covered.
So join us on Tuesdays and Thursdays where we help you to simplify the science of work and build amazing workplace cultures.
Welcome to Mental Health Matters Office Hours, Leanne. It's so great to chat with you.
Thank you so much for having me, Audrey. Always a pleasure to spend time in your company.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for inviting me on your podcast. We've just seen a little bit of that. I mean, you have some amazing conversations on there. And I'm going to jump straight in, really. Have you ever had any experiences where you listen to them and go, that can't be real?
Yeah, it's surprising how many actually, especially as part of our, we do a workplace surgery as part of our episodes. So a lot of the questions we get in, I'm like, wow. I think things recently that come to mind as well, we cover a lot of news stories, what's happening in the world of work. The recent rant, for lack of a better word, by Jamie Dimon was quite shocking from JP Morgan. We talked about that and what was quite... it is sad about it is that after we aired the episode, we had people getting in touch from JP Morgan telling us what it's actually like, being on the inside. So that was quite shocking in terms of anyone didn't see it. He had a whole rant about Gen Z, working from home, about how people are slacking off. He's giving two fingers to any kind of consultation, employee consultation or any kind of feedback on it. So that was quite shocking. The other one I think that really made me smile was we interviewed a incredible leadership trainer and coach called Kate Waterfall Hill. She's quite infamous on TikTok. She's known as Linda the Bad Manager. She's racked up more than 100 million views across social media. And she basically does kind of skits about bad leadership behaviours. And there's so many that I recognise so much and that she's talked about, but things like a CEO introducing mental health days and then being annoyed when people actually take them. Managers expecting people to work the promotion without actually paying them for the promotion. So many from Kate Waterfall Hill. It's there's a lot of bad behaviours out there.
It's scary, isn't it? I mean, what do you think causes bad behaviour at work? Is it just the people? Is it the culture? Is it stress?
Yeah, all of the above. I think, do you know what? I think the first thing I always like to remind people is that very few people actually go to work with the intention of being mean and manipulative and horrible and just making your day worse. Don't get me wrong, there are some people, and we actually spoke to Dr. Abigail Marsh, who's one of the world leading experts in psychopathy. And she reminded us how, psychopathy is about 1 in 100. So actually, if you work in an organization with 1,000 people, chances are you're going to have 10 people who are psychopathic in that organization. And chances are one of those might be a leader, but it's still a fairly small percentage. So it's unlikely, that's the case. Typically, I think people are it's a lack of intention. I think people are fearful of their own reputation, their own job, losing control. Things not being done well enough to their exacting standards, ignorance, not knowing how to delegate, not how to hold a space for somebody to have a conversation. And I think a big one as well is currently in the current climate and the climate we've had the last 5 years is stress.
Yeah.
As she said, people are stretched, people are to the point where things are heavy. And with that, there's a classic symptoms of burnout, that irritability, that directness, that snappiness, that detachment, pulling away from relationships, not wanting to engage in those relationships at work. There's a whole host of reasons.
No, that's so true. That's so true. And sort of relating to that, you and I know you work in organizations as well as a psychologist. There is a difference between bad behavior, which sometimes we can see the root cause, you can deal with it, and a really toxic situation, a toxic culture. I know when I've gone in places, you almost do feel that energy, and people are kind of cagey about what they say. They always feel that someone is going to hear them. And I just remember once in somewhere, it's when I think they were leaving, but I'd actually been there past my probation period. It was a night out, and one of them just then spilled his guts about what the organisation was like, saying, well, you've passed your probation period now, so you may as well know what you're getting into. I didn't stay that long, actually, in the end. But anyway, what's the difference between bad behaviour and something that's really endemically toxic?
Yeah, I mean, there could be so many reasons. I think it always comes from the top. I think whatever a tone is being set by senior leadership is ultimately going to be what filtrates through down the organization. I think fundamentally it comes down to a lack of psychological safety, not feeling that you're able to call out bad behaviors, question decisions that don't make sense, for fear of that repercussion or negative consequences. And I guess an environment where there are negative impacts of speaking up, and the prevalence of it, that continues. There is no breaking it. That is just ingrained in the behaviours, the worst behaviours tolerated, which is my favourite definition of culture from John Amici. What defines culture is the worst behaviours tolerated. And I think when the worst behaviours are tolerated and the worst behaviours are more prevalent than any other, then that's what creates a toxic environment. I would also say as well, though, Audrey, that we tend to focus a lot on the leaders and the organisation, as we rightly should, because for too long we're putting that responsibility on the individual. That said, I do think there's an element of toxic environments being toxic because an individual is fundamentally mismatched with that culture or way of working. So I think it's as important for somebody who feels they're in a toxic environment to assess, actually, is this a toxic environment, or am I just fundamentally out of sync with how things operate around here?
I love that. I was recently at a pageant workshop, for want of a different place to be, and Sophia Mayers, who was running the workshop, she gave a really good example of that. You can be the full package, but just at the wrong address, and it's a really nice way of looking at it. It's like, well, there's nothing wrong with people individually, they're just not in the right environment for them to thrive. And I think it's really good that you've brought that point up. I mean, why do we put up with bad behaviour, either on the side of the leadership sometimes, because you may be, I don't know, scared to take someone to task or not have the backing to do so, or as an employee? Why do we put up with bad behaviour for such a long time that it almost begins to become the norm?
I think it comes back to that psychological safety. We might not feel that, or perceive psychological safety. We think for whatever reason that we're not able to bring that concern to our manager about, how things are working or how people are being treated. And that might not be the intention of the manager. It might not be that that thought out. So I think that the lack of agency, I think, about being able to have that conversation with managers is a big thing. I think circumstance, it's tough out there. The cost of living crisis is still having an impact. There aren't as many jobs out there as there were. People are needing different things from work. There's a lot of uncertainty around AI. The climate is making it tough for job seekers. I think people are holding on, for the good of their families, their financial situation, their own career development. That said, I think that is a cycle that we're currently in. And I think people, particularly post-pandemic, aren't putting up with the behaviours as long as they used to. And I think the perfect example of that was the Great Resignation, when everything aligned and came together to a point where people felt safe to look for another job, to move on from an organisation. We saw this mass exodus of people leaving organisations to the point we called it the Great Resignation. So I don't think any employer or leader should be disillusioned by the current state of things at the minute, because once the economy does swing back, people won't put up with that, and the same will happen again.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. We're going to keep Leanne with us and carry on talking about the workplace and the ways we can start improving things for ourselves and as leaders for our organisations. But for now, let's take another look at her fabulous Truth Work Lies podcast.
Dark empaths.
Right. That sounds a bit weird. Go on.
Dark empaths. Yeah. I'd not heard this term before. Thought it certainly grabbed my attention. Interesting article from BBC Science Focus. I can't imagine that's one that you're subscribed to, Albert. I am. So yes, an article written by Dr. Nadja Haim and Dr. Emmanuel Fino about a new group of people that psychologists have discovered and coined dark empaths. So basically, these people have dark personality traits such as psychopathy and narcissism, but also above average levels of empathy, making them particularly complex and potentially dangerous. So you will probably remember from our episode on psychopathy that dark side personality traits are much more common than you think. About 1 in 100 people are psychopathic. And research actually suggests that dark empaths are actually about 20% of the population.
That's quite a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot more common, which means if you've got a team of like 60 people, then you've got about 12 people on your team that are dark empaths. Why does this matter? Well, the thing is, you'll remember psychopathy typically is defined by people lacking empathy. A dark empath is someone who has the traditional dark personality traits like manipulation or narcissism, but the high levels of empathy, but not necessarily empathy as we know it. Because what it basically means is that they use empathy to connect, rather than to connect and support, to control and manipulate. So imagine someone who knows exactly how you feel, but uses that understanding to steer things their way.
Definitely met some of those people.
Yeah, so in the workplace, this might look like somebody who takes credit for your ideas while making you feel like they're doing you a favour. They might navigate office politics really, really well, always position themselves as indispensable and quietly undermine you and other people on the team. And it's not just about these big dramatic acts of deception. It's often the small calculated moves that can be just as harmful. And this does tie back to an earlier episode, as I said, where we talked about psychopathy, and particularly in the workplace. Not all psychopaths are criminal masterminds or high-powered CEOs, despite what pop culture might have us believe. But the presence of people with dark traits, including dark empaths, can still create significant challenges in a professional environment because there's a lot more of them.
Leanne, as I said, on your podcast, you have these really interesting conversations, and we've just been speaking about how sometimes there is an organisational issue. Sometimes we need to get that little bit self-reflective. Do you think that we as employees sometimes need to sort of take the initiative to take that step back and go, actually, was that me?
Yes, I think we do need to take that initiative. Maybe not in terms of was that my fault? Was there to blame? There's a lot of that in the workplace at the moment. There's a lot of finger pointing. So I think I'd prefer to kind of look at it as should every well-rounded human professional work on their self-awareness? Yes. And I think that's what we can do, and also help assess that that mismatch. I promise, Audrey, it's not because I'm on your show that I'm quoting this. If you listen to any interview with me, I usually end up talking about your vitals model, because I think it's so brilliant in terms of helping somebody do that self-audit, self-assessment, reflection, to really understand the type of work and environment that is going to be effective for them, the environment in which they're going to thrive. That is, what are your values, your interests, your temperament, your around the clock, your life goals, your strengths, and really kind of keeping an eye on those. And I think in terms of that, is it me? Am I that, square peg in a round hole? It's looking through those vitals and seeing where they're not being met, either through your work, your community, through other aspects of your life. And work is such a big aspect of who we are and what we do. We spend so much time at work that if our vitals aren't being met by work, or the majority aren't being met by work, then it probably is time to think about moving on to something that's going to suit us much better.
Yeah, no, and thank you. I do need to add, I wish I could take all the credit for that model. Meg Selig was the first person to talk about vitals in Psychologies Today, in fact. But I use it a lot, so much in the training, and I think that's such a practical tool to think about. And that kind of relates to the next question. What sort of bad behaviours might we display? Just say our vitals, our values, our interests are not aligned. I know when I've been in a place of work, what I have done is you try and twist it to make it fit you better. And of course, that's not what the workplace needs or wants. So you're sort of better off maybe moving somewhere else. What have you seen or spoken about on your podcast?
One thing I saw recently when we talked about that, I was really shocked by, it's called job ghosting. I'm not sure if you've heard of this, but basically a candidate will ghost the employer at various points of the recruitment process, including the point in which they're due to start the job, and just not turn up, not say anything. And I was like, wow, that's wasting a lot of people's time and money and energy, and also taking opportunities away from other candidates who, might have been really excited about the opportunity. So that was quite a shocking one. And the kind of the reasoning for it was really that candidates don't know how to either communicate that they don't want to continue with the job process. I think putting some of that back on the organisation. I'm not sure a lot of organisations invest in the kind of the candidate experience. There's regular check-in points of how they're doing through the process and how they're feeling about things. So I think there's a bit of accountability from the organisation side. But that I thought was quite a shocking behaviour actually from employees.
It really is. I don't think I dare do that. Maybe that's just my own upbringing. You politely say no, don't you?
You don't want to burn bridges. You don't know if that organisation might have your dream job advertised in, 2 years' time. People don't forget being ghosted.
Yes.
That hurts.
And then it's whether you get recommended to somebody else as well. You're always being watched, aren't you?
Yeah, and do you know what? That's an interesting trend actually within, and I don't like to point fingers at Gen Z, but I think they're the most active on social media, and this is where we tend to see these things being done. But things like loud quitting or rage quitting, where people will film them quitting their job, and I think whilst I'm pleased that these bad behaviours from employees are being called out. And people are understanding that this isn't the way it should be. Equally, I wonder if there's a lack of care from some of our young professionals about how actually this might impact their reputation and longevity in terms of their professional brand. So yeah, words of caution, I think, for anyone who is tempted to post these things on social media.
Fully agree with you. And kind of in a way relating to that, because the only thing that I guess I have been guilty of is the quiet quitting, when you kind of really don't want to be there anymore and you just do the bare minimum, but you're not shirking your duty. You're just not going over and above it. I'm not going to organize the birthday card anymore. I'm not going to organize the social anymore. But what can we do as employees if we know it's not the right job, but we can't leave yet because we've got commitments, we've got other needs, or we maybe simply just can't find a job that suits? What do you think we could ask for so we do keep that healthy relationship with the organisation until we finally find our way out?
There is definitely a sense of urgency from us as humans when we realise that we're not happy, things aren't out of sync, or we're not achieving exactly what we want to achieve. And the pace of the world right now, we're very impatient about it, and there can be that sense of it needs to be fixed and changed now. And actually, I think there is an element of the most content people are usually those who are as engaged with the journey as they are the destination. And with that, understanding what areas you can change and tweak now, areas that you can work towards, and things that you might just need to suck up, if I'm being honest. Because it's things like, okay, if your values are fundamentally misaligned with the organisation you work for, that's going to be a really uncomfortable place to be, and you're not going to be able to be there long at all. That is a more urgent, situation. If it's more of a case of, this job doesn't really fit with my life goals and that it won't enable me to get the job I want in 2 jobs' time, it doesn't have that career trajectory. We see that often in small businesses. Well, it might be that actually the skills you can develop there will get you to your next job and then on to the next one. It might be that there's this process you're going to need to go through over 2 to 3 years to actually have that need met in terms of work. And I think the other thing is looking at other aspects of our life where we can derive this sense of meaning and purpose while we are having to kind of go through the motions, and particularly in your early career where you just need to kind of suck it up a little bit to get that experience. Where else can you derive that sense of meaning? So for me, I started in a job in HR consultancy that was okay, but it was a bit samey. I graduated in 2008, great, global financial crisis, not a great time. HR was, lots of budget cuts. So for me, I was doing lots of kind of samey projects that weren't particularly interesting or fulfilling. So I started volunteering for the Samaritans, which is a mental health charity, suicide prevention. I had amazing experiences there in terms of finding my community, finding people with my values, feeling that I was having a positive impact on the world. And that for me was a huge source of energy whilst I was kind of in these early stages in the climate that I was in.
Yes.
And what's funny, Audrey, is when I actually went on to my next job, the job I really wanted, I sat down in that interview and the interviewer asked me so many questions about my work at Samaritans and barely anything about the 3-5 years experience I had in HR consultancy and coaching. So it just goes to show that actually, doing something else, and volunteering especially, we know all the great benefits of volunteering in terms of our well-being, but actually practically speaking, could be really good for our professional development too.
Fully agree, because there's so many transferable skills, you meet different people, and all of that can be useful when you come to go for whatever that dream job is. And actually relating to that, you remind me whilst you were speaking, of sometimes organizations maybe need to be clearer about career paths. So just for example, in the teaching world, you've got this whole thing about, okay, you can become form tutor, then head of year, then you go into deputy headship and so on. And it's the pastoral route. But I always only preferred the head of department route. And I know you were kind of stopped kind of at the top of head of department, but that to me was the direction that I would have been better placed in, whereas sometimes I think people only ever understand there's one pathway, and I think there's more than one. And so it's look for those different pathways, as well as other opportunities such as volunteering or mentoring or secondments and things. I love that. Now, the other thing I know we've talked about on your podcast before, Leanne, is remote work. And I know and I love the fact you've been working remotely for such a long time, and there's so many benefits of it. Do you think it's getting harder to find now? Because I think it feels like everyone's getting called back to the office, and in some cases, with a studio, we have no choice. We have to use the facilities in the office, as it were. But do you think remote work is getting harder to find? And if it is, why is that?
I think we hear a lot about return to office mandates in the news because these big organisations, and as we heard from Jamie Dimon, picking up a bit of a fuss about it. So it's newsworthy, it hits the headlines. There are still plenty of small organisations out there. And let's not forget that 95% plus of the employees in the UK are actually small businesses that are much more open-minded about flexible working and working from home, or if not being fully remote, being remote first, or at the very least hybrid. That said, I think what's really tricky is if you're looking for a corporate role and you want to be fully remote, that's getting harder. Because, and probably mainly because we could blame it on leadership and control and whatever they want to dress it up as now in terms of the return to office. A lot of it, I think, is just about costs as well. They've got these big fancy offices and very expensive and nobody's using them. So I think, in terms of corporate, it is getting harder. But I think I started remote work in 2013, and I had a very progressive employer who allowed me to basically operate a hybrid model. I then moved to a fully remote company in 2015 and worked for them, then became freelance. So I think if you're willing to be flexible on what your job is and how it's contributing to your development, your career, I'll be honest, there was times in 2015 especially where my priority was to be remote. So I compromised on certain elements of the job. It wasn't quite stretching me in the same way as I wanted. It wasn't quite contributing to my career, long-term career development in the way I wanted, but it was giving me that remote opportunity. And over time, I was able to evolve that through my own development, through understanding the other opportunities out there. The growing gig economy, it's growing so quickly that there are opportunities there as well, I think, for those people who are comfortable to be freelance. So I think, is the ideal 9-to-5 corporate job with great salary and benefits getting hard to find fully remote? Probably, but that was always really hard.
Yeah.
I think in terms of a remote job with innovative companies, or for those people who are willing to carve their own role somehow from either the gig economy or freelance or a combination of different things, I think there are more opportunities now than there ever have been, and I hope that continues.
Yes, definitely. And if you don't mind, just before we go to the next break, if a personal question about working remotely, I know that sometimes, because like you, I've been freelance since 2014, and I have got lonely. Doing it sometimes. And I remember when the pandemic hit, I was so excited because people were WhatsApping me during the day, and that never used to happen because it was just me at a kettle rather than a water cooler. There was no conversation. So have you had the ups and downs of remote work?
Oh, definitely. Honestly, my social life was thriving during lockdown for the same reason. Everyone wanted to jump on a Zoom with me. It was great. Do you know what? Yes. And there's one thing that I did, and it was the start of 2021. And it was a time, 2022, I think. It was just when we were coming out of the pandemic, and I was starting to feel a bit disconnected and a bit disillusioned with kind of being isolated as a freelance, like not having that team around me, not having those professionals around me to share those values and beliefs and ways of doing things. So I decided to message everybody who responded or commented or liked a LinkedIn post that I put up. And I think it was related to well-being, or there's something that would, assess values there somehow, people that, might be on my wavelength. And I messaged every single one of them. And I said, if you're ever free for a virtual coffee, I'd love to meet you. I had a week where I was just back to back to back Zoom calls, exhausted because I'm also quite introverted. But there are people that I met there that I'm still in touch with now, who I'll speak to once a month to kind of go, how's it going? What's going on? What are other ways we can collaborate? Just have a chat. I've got real, intimate relationships with people that I've never met. Yeah. So I think it's harder to kind of accidentally build the people in that social support network around you being a remote freelancer. It takes a bit more intention, a bit more effort, but it's absolutely doable.
Oh my goodness. Well, we're keeping Leanne with us, and we're now going to go over to our resident psychologist, Dr. Meg Arroll, to talk about working from home.
So today we're going to talk a little bit about loneliness, and in particular, when we can feel quite lonely if we work from home most or all of the time. Now, loneliness or chronic loneliness is a serious issue. Research has found that when we feel loneliness on a chronic basis, so not just a few days, a month, but really day after day after day, it can be as detrimental to our physical health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Now, that is not meant to be alarmist, but just to show how important it is to really pay attention to whether we're feeling lonely, not just for our mental health, but for our physical health too. And of course, if we feel lonely on a chronic basis, that can lead to feelings of depression, low mood, and for some, it can also make us feel quite anxious. So it is important to tackle loneliness. And the feelings of loneliness are different than solitude or being alone, because we can be alone but not feel lonely at all. Or sometimes we can be in a crowded room and feel incredibly isolated. So it really is about that sense of human connection. And sometimes when we work from home, we don't experience that human connection very much or at all on a daily basis. So there are some ways we can combat loneliness when working from home. So before anyone had heard of COVID-19 or the pandemic, I actually was working from home part-time anyway. I was seeing clients through Skype then. This was pre-Zoom actually, because I work with people with long-term health conditions. So coming into a consultation room, coming into London was a barrier in and of itself. And people with long-term conditions, they certainly can experience isolation and feelings of loneliness. And sometimes if we go and talk to people who have had to manage loneliness for a long time, they give us some really important insights into how you can perhaps be alone, be by yourself, but not feel lonely, as it were. And a lot of this is about being intentional about our daily activities. That sense of intentionality is really important. And these are things that probably aren't going to be a surprise, but to schedule in some interactions into your day. And we can use technology in this way to serve us. Now, when we're talking about interactions, say on social media platforms, the important thing here is that the interactions are not passive. So we're not simply scrolling and liking other people's posts, and that's okay if we just do a little bit of it, but really about connecting with others, because it is about that connection. So scheduling in some time, whether that's on something like WhatsApp or another social platform or messaging platform, to just have a quick chat. You can think about it like a virtual water cooler moment. So say in days gone by, we may have worked in offices, I certainly did, and you would just bump into people. You would just meet people by the water cooler or for a coffee or a cup of tea, but to schedule this in with other people that work from home. And we can also do this, importantly, with people that are within our workspace or without. So it could be with a friend, say, who also works from home. And just have this as a regular reminder, have an alarm come up for both individuals or groups of individuals, and to just say, hey, how's your day going? Now, this is a type of micro interaction, and there is some fascinating research that has shown how important micro interactions are. So one study, it looked at people on a train, and one group of individuals was asked to interact with another human being, and one group was asked just to stare out the window. And those that interacted with a stranger, not someone they knew, and really just had surface chit-chat. We weren't talking about any deep and meaningful topics, just some surface chit-chat. The research showed that they actually had better mental health outcomes than those of us or people in the study that kind of isolated themselves and didn't interact with other people. So when working from home, this is something we can do if we don't have mobility problems per se. So going to a local shop and just having one of those micro interactions with other people in the shop or a shop owner, going to a cafe, going for a walk, walking your dog if you have one. Now, animals are wonderful icebreakers, so they can actually help us with those micro interactions. So this is one of the keys to managing feelings of isolation and loneliness when we work from home, is to be more intentional about it and to make sure we have some of those micro interactions. Some of those can be virtually through groups or social media platforms, and some of them face to face, if at all possible.
Welcome back to Mental Health Matters Office Hours. I've got Leanne Elliott with me, and we are talking about all aspects to do with work. And Leanne, recently there was an article which talked about consultants being overrated. I think it was in Forbes or one of those, and certainly they can cost a lot, but they might well bring a fresh perspective. And after all, we can't force people to make changes and so on. What are your thoughts on this? And because you're, I know, a workplace psychologist, would a counsellor or workplace psychologist be better than a consultant, or is it horses for courses, do you think?
I think consultant is a very catch-all term, and it's not one that's regulated or moderated or checked, or anyone can call himself a consultant. So I think the onus is on the individual organisation engaging that consultant to do their homework and do their due diligence. Something immediately that springs to mind for me with any kind of consultant that I'm faced with is how long are you going to spend helping me define the problem? If you're only going to throw me an off-the-shelf solution, or you're going to spend 10 minutes chatting me through what my issue is and then try and sell me that solution, I don't trust you as a consultant. You're not worth my time, you're not worth my money, and I'm certainly not going to get return on my investment. I want to work with a consultant who's going to spend 80% of that engagement just defining the problem, helping me understand exactly what the issue is, exactly where things are falling down, exactly where I can improve. Because then I know when I design that intervention, that bespoke activity, whatever it needs to be, it's going to address the problem in hand in an effective way, and in a way that I can measure the return on that investment. There's some kind of evaluation built in there too. Is a psychologist better? I mean, yeah, I'm going to be biased and say, of course, but equally, no, because it might be that the problem isn't something that I can solve, isn't in my wheelhouse, but I will spend the time as a psychologist figuring that out and understanding if I am the best person to help you. And I think with working with a psychologist, what you are going to get is we're trained to work that way. We're trained to spend the majority of our time defining that problem. We're trained to built in evaluation so we can show you the impact of that investment. So there is an added reassurance that comes with working with an occupational psychologist over a generic consultant.
Yeah, I fully agree with you, and I love that. I think I couldn't have said it better. It's just, that's beautiful what you said about whether that consultant is worth your time or not. Okay, let's go positive. There are some really good practices out there, and I've been lucky enough to see a lot of them, and you will have covered a lot of them on your podcast as well. What for you is going on out there that you've thought, that's brilliant, we should bottle that and take it to every organisation?
One guest that we spoke to who blew my mind was a lady called Nora Burns. She's a Fortune 250 HR senior HR leader, and she went on to be a consultant, and she was kind of like, well, how do we understand what problems are happening? Her area of specialism was around recruitment, talent acquisition. So she decided to run her own research that she called the undercover candidate. And she presented herself as a neutral candidate, not as Nora Burns, as somebody else, and went to more than 100 interviews just to understand what the candidate experience was like. Wow. Some of the things that she told me were shocking. The number of jobs that she got that she absolutely wasn't qualified to do. The number of jobs or interviews she went to where the majority of the interview would happen in the corridor as they were trying to find an empty room to have the interview in. Oh my. Shockingly, the number of times she experienced sexual harassment in interviews.
In an interview?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Really, really shocking. But what she did is she took those insights and all of that research and used that data to create various programs and interventions to help corporations recruit better from that candidate experience perspective, as well as everything we know about psychological assessment at work. And for me, that was just taking best practice to a level I haven't seen before. I see a lot of psychologists talk about, how we need to improve recruitment practices and, the right tools to use and how. But in terms of actually digging into that human side of it, that employee experience side of it, I thought that was really cool.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And I am shocked as you're speaking. My jaw is dropping further and further. I mean, sexual harassment in an interview is that's mind-boggling. and then getting jobs you're not qualified. It's frightening. The sad part about the being interviewed in a corridor. I was delivering a leadership session in the NHS, and I just remember two of the delegates giggling about the fact, we couldn't get many nurses to be recruited this year. Oh yeah. Do you remember when we had the recruitment day last year and we forgot to book a room? And so we had all of these people turn up and then we had nowhere to put them. And that will be why you couldn't get anyone to interview.
Yeah, you've got to wonder. Yeah. What else did you expect, really? Wow.
Exactly. It's frightening. Absolutely frightening. But also sticking with the positive stuff, you are the podcast partner for the big workplace expos, and I think that's absolutely brilliant. What new innovations have you seen that you think, that could take off in 2025, or I'm looking forward to having that implemented in the workplace?
There are a lot of innovations out there, and particularly with AI, there's so many more coming. And this might be controversial, Audrey, but I'm hoping to see less innovation in 2025 because I'll be honest, I think there's an element we need to go back to basics. And I'm seeing a lot of these kind of vacuous platforms, AI driven, set up to measure employee engagement, but it barely measures sentiment, and people pay a lot of money for it. And really, it's just so that they can look like they're doing something without actually having to talk to their people. So I think for me, it's kind of like innovations I'm excited about. I'm excited about going back to basics and actually talking about how to create human organizations where people actually feel like they're cared about. That would be a nice place to start. With that in mind, in terms of the innovations I've seen, and they're the innovations that excite me, is that people are actually using technology or using innovative business models, operational models to actually have an impact. There's an organization called Perks, who we met through one of these health expos, and they're an employee benefit platform. They're basically like an EAP, but specifically for small organizations or people who are self-employed. It's very cost effective. It's £5 per month per employee, which you can do as an individual or as a business. And it's things like telehealth. You can get a GP appointment the same day, eye test, shopping discounts, gym, counseling sessions, things that are actually going to make a difference to me as an employee. Wow. That, if I'm a single parent, for example, my child isn't very well, I need to get them a doctor's appointment. We know how hard that is. I'm going to spend hours on the phone at certain times when I'm meant to be at work or I'm meant to be in a meeting. It's a quick tip tap. That's booked in in 3 hours time. They give you a prescription, you get that sorted. And it's, that's the innovation I'm excited about, is making these typically corporate level benefits and perks, ways of working, accessible to the employees of small businesses. And that's why Truth, Lies and Work was started, why we set it up, was to bring these best practices to small organizations, because as we said, that's the majority of people are employed by a small organization, and also entrepreneurial businesses have the agility to be able to make these changes, and typically they get it because they subscribe to working differently, because that's why they set up their business anyway, because they're frustrated with the status quo elsewhere.
I love it.
So yeah, that's what I'm excited about this year, is Perks.
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to go look that up after this.
Stella Smith as well, I should say, the CEO and founder, Stella Smith, is phenomenal. Her philosophy, her way of working, the way she manages her team. Yeah. Chef's kiss. She's incredible.
Amazing. And actually, that leads us very perfectly on to, what are your 3 top tips for being well at work, please?
Yeah, I think number 1, if you're a business leader listening, train your managers. If you just ignore everything else we've talked about, everything else, just forget about it. Train your managers, invest in their development. Something shocking, isn't it? Like 82% of managers are accidental, have never received any form of training. And we know they have the biggest impact on employee engagement, well-being. We know it's a big impact. So I think that's the one. Train your managers, or if you're a manager, look for some training, because that will have a positive impact on the people around you. I think secondly, as we, going back to what we said about defining the problem, and we've talked about this a lot as well on Truth, Lies and Work, is that understanding the organizational environment you're currently creating for your people, the psychosocial factors and risk factors. And there is going to be things like, reason, do people have a clear purpose, their role, do they understand what their role is, and contribution to that mission delivery? Do they have positive relationships? Are they getting appropriate recognition? All of these resources, do they have the right resources? And take that time to actually understand the environment you're creating for your people. John Amici said in his book, which I'm a big fan of, the most important thing you can do for somebody who is lost is tell them where they are. Yeah. And that's my philosophy as a consultant, is I'm working with a client. The best thing I can do for you is help you figure out where you are. So then when you start to make those changes, it'll have impact. So that'll be the second thing I think in terms of employee wellbeing, is figure out exactly the environment you're currently creating. So you know where you can improve, and also where you're smashing it and you can celebrate yourself. Yeah. And I think finally, if there is, once you understand, you've trained your managers, you understand where you are, is there some kind of individualization that you can build in? And if you've got great managers, they're going to have those one-to-one conversations with their staff. They're going to understand the people who need slight, adjustments in their ways of working, or the flexibility that they need. Anything you can do to help a person with the individual demands they have in their life, because we don't work in a vacuum. Everything has an impact. If there's a way that we can just make certain adjustments to the working life of our people to better meet their individual circumstances, well-being is going to go through the roof, engagement is going to go through the roof, performance is going to go through the roof. What a world.
That's beautiful. And you just hit the nail on the head, because that is what being well is all about. It's being a well person. It's so individual. It's so people focused. And I just love that point about just telling somebody where they are, and that's it. It's not telling them where to go or anything like that. That's really important. I love it. Leanne, where can we find you? Listen to the Truth Lies Work podcast, your socials and so on, please.
Yeah, in terms of where you'll find me, probably LinkedIn is where I'm the most active if you want to talk to me directly. In terms of Truth, Lies and Work, wherever you get your podcasts, we're also on YouTube as well. Or if you want to learn more about the work I do with my clients, you can go to oblonghq.com.
Absolutely amazing. Such a pleasure chatting with you, as always. Thank you so much, Leanne.
Oh, thank you for having me, Audrey.
And we'll go over to Business Boost. Today's Business Boost covers a little technique that we use a lot in workplace and actually in general psychological training. It's called the Johari window. And this is a quadrant, and the way we use it is to get people to reflect on the following things. In one corner, it's the things that you know about yourself and you're happy to share with others. So it's the things that others know about you as well. That's one quadrant. Another quadrant is the things that you don't know about yourself, but others might tell you. The third is the things that you know about yourself, but choose not to tell anybody, so the things that you keep secret. And then the very last quadrant is the things that other people don't know about you and you don't know about yourself either. And that's the stuff that often can come out in things like therapy or coaching or counselling. It's a very interesting window to really start thinking about our behaviour and how our behaviour might impact others. But also, and this is how I like to use it in the workplace, it's a great way to get people to think about, these are the things that I need to improve on or change or could develop. And that's the quadrant that I tend to focus on, the stuff that you don't know about yourself, but I've observed, or that I can mirror back to you as an observation in our conversations. That bit can be awkward for people. People don't always like that bit. And I get it, because no one necessarily likes being told, oh, you did that. But the whole point about the therapeutic space, the training space, the counselling space, is it is a safe space. It's a safe space with no consequence. So if you take the feedback, and whilst I say I'm giving feedback, it might be wrong. You can challenge it. But you can also think, okay, why did I come across in that particular way? Even though I didn't intend or mean to come across in that particular way, if that's what you were getting, then what are the reasons for it? And so that's why it's so powerful, because we can have that conversation. And in doing so, we might move something that we didn't know about ourselves, that other people knew of us, into the I know about it and I'm letting you know about it, because that way we can manage it. So, next time you get feedback, see it as an opportunity to develop, reflect, learn, and grow. And now, let's head over to Dr. Gus Chaves for some of his top tips.
Struggling to remain positive. Feel like you naturally lean toward pessimism. Let's try this. Be the interior designer of your own life. Imagine you're redesigning a house. So the step one would be strip everything away. No decoration, no wallpaper, no lights, just an empty space. And see it for what it truly is. Then we get to step number 2. Now, consciously choose what to bring back in. What will make this a good place to be? Okay, now that you understand the concept, let's apply this to your words. Okay, so step 1 would be clear the space. So remove the words you normally use to describe your life, especially the ones that frame things negatively. Now, what's left? Just observe for a second. Try to see what's happening. The tip here is to be descriptive and forget your judgmental part. Then we get to step number 2, which is once you've done that, you can start redecorating, and this time with more thoughtful, uplifting, or simply more accurate words. And with that, you change the way you experience life. Instead of calling it a bad day, what if it's just a rainy day? That small shift leaves room for it to still be an amazing one. So try using neutral language to describe your day to day. See how it shifts your perspective.
Welcome back to the final part of Mental Health Matters. It's been a really fascinating conversation with Leanne, and I love Leanne, and I do highly recommend you do have a look at her podcast because she has the most amazing guests on there, and they always talk about topics which sometimes feel a bit unpalatable to talk about, but I think that's where we always need conversation. That appears to be the theme of today, and as we get to the end of the show, it's always this bit where we reflect on the things that we've learnt. And I think one thing that I will take away from today is, as much as I don't like being told things about me that I might need to work on or that other people didn't understand or had an impact that I wasn't intending, if you do get that opportunity for feedback, yes, it might come as a criticism, and yes, our immediate response is to be defensive, but if you can take it as an opportunity to learn, that can really help you, and it gives you the advantage in future. There is something in business called the service recovery paradox, and that is, if you've had an interaction with an organization and it's gone really badly, and then there's feedback given, and the organization actually takes it on, works on the feedback, and resolves the situation, what researchers found is that results in more loyalty than had everything gone smoothly in the first place. So really take that away. That's what I'm going to be taking away today. Having criticism or even negative feedback given to us is an opportunity. And we can either be defensive about it, or we can actually go, do you know what? They didn't have given that to me. They could have just gone and never spoken to me again. So see it as an opportunity. See it as a chance to grow. Let me know in the comments how you get on, and have a healthy week.